Mike founded the organization. I'm going to talk about Walk the Talk America. And if you haven't, actually, let me do a show of hands. Who has heard of Walk the Talk America? My family and 2 others. Good. This will be fresh for everybody then. So we are a pro-2A mental health organization trying to bridge the gap between the 2 cultures, firearms ownership and mental health care. For a long time, we stood across this self-imposed chasm whereby each blames the other when tragedy strikes and nothing ever really happens, and then we all move forward. So we're trying to stand right in the middle of that. A little background. There's Mike. He's speaking at the 2A rally in front of the Capitol building in Washington about 5-6 years ago. I'll get into his story in a minute here. There's me with these 2 adorable children some years ago. They're a little larger now. Can't quite fit on my shoulders that way, but we try. Ethan and Elijah, say hi to the crowd. Hi. Hi, crowd. So, Zephyr Wellness, as Ashley mentioned, is my organization. It's an outpatient counseling agency in Reno, Nevada. We did drive down from Sparks, where we live, and we ate at Stone last night, and it was delicious. And I would eat there every night if it were in my town, so I'm glad it's not. We also get support from Mental Health America, which, as Mike, if he were here, would tell you the story about how he connected with them as being the only mental health organization he found in the country that did not take a negative position on firearms. They just said, we're not getting involved. We're here to help people and save lives. We're not going to take a stance. Our mission is, through education, outreach, and engagement with both the mental health and firearms communities, Walk the Talk America would like to reduce firearm suicides and other negative incidents associated with firearms ownership. So at our core, we're a suicide prevention organization, but really what we're trying to do is get upstream from that and keep people healthy. Now, you just had, people who were in here before heard a presentation about concealed carry defense and what happens when you deploy your firearm in a certain situation and what you have to be prepared for from a legal stance. But the simple fact is that statistically, we're way more likely to turn our guns on ourselves than on other people. And that's why we exist. And we have to talk about this because you can't swing a cat at a gun show and hit somebody who hasn't been touched by firearm suicide. I'll get into a statistical overview in a minute. There's the board of directors. You may recognize some of these people if you've been in the gun community for any length of time. They all contribute in various ways, but the mental health people are me. You see D.B. Palmer, he's a clinician up in Oregon. Eddie Davenport down the center at the bottom is in North Carolina, and Brandon Covey's in Ohio. We're the first 4 really who came out of the closet, so to speak, as gun-owning practitioners. I was the first, and then after I poked my head above the waves, other people started saying, yeah, me too. I also own guns, and I'm also a practicing therapist. So, Mike used to own Eagle Imports. He'll tell the story. He says he got into the industry by nepotism. It's his 3rd generation family-owned company, and when he took it over, he ran it for a while, and the president of that company, Bill Strominger, who you see on the screen, took his life with one of their own guns in 2008. We don't really know why. We'll never really know why. Bill didn't leave a note, but the suspicion is that he suffered a DUI incident just a week or so earlier and mistakenly believed that he was going to get run out of the industry for having this drinking problem or whatever. Nobody really knows, though. And so for years, this stuck with Mike until at which point he encountered a chance occurrence after a sales meeting in Louisiana. Some lady, they were having dinner, he and his national sales manager, who is Rafael Del Valle, who's now with Bursa, just struck up a conversation. This gal was like, so you're in the firearms community. How do you work with the mental health community to deal with like mass shootings and all that stuff? And they're like, well, we don't. They blame us, we blame them. Nobody does anything and we move forward. She says, well, what do you do about it? She says, well, you know, wouldn't it be nice if we like threw $1 a gun to mental health? They sell guns, right? They're an importer. That's what Eagle Imports did. And he and Rafael thought that they had a great idea. And this lady goes, yeah, I think you're onto something. I think you're really gonna do this. So that was 2018, and shortly thereafter, he formed Walk the Talk America. 2019, we met. This is Mike with Debbie Plotnick, the Vice President for Mental Health America, together at SHOT Show in 2019. Debbie was not into firearms, kind of didn't like them, but has grown to understand and appreciate them, and now shoots regularly, which is very cool. Okay, so we say at the intersection of guns and mental health. That is the title of our training. We do a 3-part training that approximates about 9 or 10 hours. Parts 1 and 2 are available for download on our website. They're designed for clinicians, medical, mental health, nursing, whatever, to understand what the components of firearms culture are so that we don't get clumsy and awkward and chase people away with bad language and keep them from care. Now, the flip side of that coin is we're trying to demystify what counseling is for firearms owners. So in our clinical training, we go over suicide stats and information, demographics, prevalence, how often it occurs, trends, and then we usually do a vignette of some sort, a little role play, act out. There's Derek from KidSafe. He's sitting right here in the front row. He's got a little blow-up thing downstairs. You should check that out. The firearms cultural component includes the beliefs, the behaviors, the activities. We go over Guns 101. In the video that's available for free on the website, Rob Pincus, who is one of our board directors, goes through a bunch of firearms. Rob was not available when we did this in Oregon, in Yamhill County, so Derek stood in, and we borrowed some guns, and he used a lot of his, and there he is showing the audience, which is full of health and human services people from the Yamhill County area, how to operate guns and just their fundamental functions. We went over ammo, caliber types, different types of weaponry, why you use them, who uses them for what. And it's always eye-opening to the audience, especially when they get up and do the show and tell, and they're like, "What, you mean I can actually pull the charging handle?" Yeah, it's not going to explode in your face. So it's very, very cool when they get to do this stuff for the very first time and alleviate a lot of the judgment, the suspicion, the nervousness, the apprehension that comes along with that. The counseling component. There's me staged with one of my own clinicians. I raised her since she was a pup. Her name's Angel. She came to us as a student, and now she's fully licensed and on her way to becoming a supervisor. But we talk about what to expect when you come into the counseling office. We talk about the difference between theoretical approach and the actual practical application. We talk about types of illness. We talk about treatment course. You should not be, sometimes I clap to get people's attention, sometimes it's before I make a really important point. You should not be in counseling forever. My personal bias. I know there are people out there who disagree, but mental illness can and should be overcome. I say that regularly. It's just like physical illness. Nobody walks around saying, "I am a broken arm," or "I am a headache," or "I am the flu." It's not an identity, but we sure do say, "I am bipolar," or "I am schizophrenic," or "he is ADHD," right? Don't say that, please. You can and should complete your treatment. And then we talk about the ethics, some of which have to do with treatment course, because I think it's highly unethical that we would keep people in care in perpetuity, presuming that they can never overcome what they're sick with. If that were true, my profession would cease to exist. Nobody could heal, right? So then we conclude the presentation, go back, with an overview of ERPOs, Extreme Risk Protection Orders, Gun Violence Restraining Order, Red Flag Law. They're all the same thing for the same law. I talk about burden of proof. Gary, right? Just finished? Yes. Gary probably talked about burden of proof. One of the most insidious angles of a red flag law is that you have a much lower burden of proof to take somebody's rights away than the burden of proof required to restore them. So the burden of proof for somebody to fill out a petition to a judge is reasonable suspicion if you're a family member. That's the lowest burden of proof. That petition then goes in front of the judge. Judge determines whether there's a preponderance of evidence to execute the order. He says yes. Go, deputies, take this person's property. But then to get your rights back, it's clear and convincing evidence. So we talk about why that's a problem. We talk about enforcement, and we talk about background check laws. I live in Nevada. I'm guessing you all live in California. Derek lives in Oregon. Simultaneous to most of these laws, most of them replicate each other. If you look at different states, the red flag law looks the same with very few exceptions. California is slightly different, but mostly the same. New York is very, very different, and Colorado has just augmented its red flag law, so it's no longer family members in law enforcement who can red flag you. It's my people, it's doctors, it's teachers, school counselors. It's really bad. So when we talk about obstacles to care access, increasing and leading to suicidal ideation and completion, this is what we're discussing. We're discussing policies. So when these laws came into place, usually it came along with a background check law. So not only in a time of crisis can you not go seek care because you're afraid that the therapist is going to tattle on you to .gov? You can't even do the right thing by handing your guns over to a trusted friend without going through a background check, lest both of you become felons. It's very, very bad. So we cover that in the presentation, which is usually eye-opening to the practitioners, because they're like, well, I had no idea. I thought I was doing the right thing by just taking the person's gun in a time of need. All right, then we talk about language and influence. Storage versus staging, very, very important. If you're not familiar with this, storing is usually the locking up and putting in a safe, not going to touch it for a really long time. Staging is ready access when needed. A lot of people don't know that. A lot of people in my profession have no idea that there's even a difference. Safes and locks, how do we secure our firearms? We have to talk about this. If I'm a mental health practitioner, I'm working with somebody in a state of crisis, and they are a firearm owner, I need to be able to competently say, how do you store, stage, secure your guns? Because if you are the person in need in this time of crisis, maybe you shouldn't be around them. Doesn't mean we need to involve the authorities, but we need to have a competent conversation. An area where we as Walk the Talk America are trying to change the narrative is responsible versus safe. Now, everybody in the gun community thinks they're the safest people on the planet, and by and large, that's very true. We harp on safety. Derek does it with the children. What's your name? Yes. Julian. Julian and I just had a little chat out there. He's like, I'm about to become a dad. You look like a dad because you're talking to these kids like you're their father. And he's like, what do you do about gun safety? And I said, we just brought him up with it. We teach gun safety all the time, and firearms owners are usually the safest people anywhere. But the word safe is very, very subjective. And in the last 4 years or so, since 2020, it's become very watered down also. Stay home, stay safe, wear a mask, stay safe. We just came from our motel in Escondido right around the corner here, and they was like, due to COVID-19, you can't serve your own food, so take it up to your room and eat it in solitude or whatever. It's like, you mean COVID-24? Like, what are we doing here? Stay safe, right? Safe is very, very, very different depending on who you talk to. So what we're trying to do is shift the conversation from safe storage to responsible storage. And we like to define that as saying responsible storage means preventing unauthorized access. Well, who's unauthorized? Certainly these two, unless I'm standing right there with them. They're unauthorized. So I need to make sure that my safes are locked with a code that I know that they don't. Who else might be unauthorized? Non-rhetorical question requiring a response, please.
Spouse.
Spouse might be unauthorized. Why? Yeah, I married a felon. No. What's that?
I was going to say SB2.
Which one? What is that? Read me up. I'm not.
Reciprocity between husbands.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Laura Smith, national spokesperson for the Liberal Gun Club, right here. That's their sticker. That's also their sticker. She's an attorney. She read me in on that. I just learned that a couple of years ago. Turns out in California, spouses can't own the same property, apparently. So yeah, I can't even if I live in California, I can't even hand my guns to my wife in the time of need. She's not authorized. Who else is unauthorized, though, in a traditional sense? Burglars, absolutely. Yeah, so when we talk to people, we're like, hey, yeah, strangers. They don't get any stranger than this guy. When we talk to people about, hey, are you storing your gun safely? I use a word that means different things between me and the person I'm talking to. Yeah, absolutely, totally safe. Safe all the time. Got them stuffed under cushions all over the place on top of the appliances, and I'm super safe. Okay, are you storing responsibly? I'm the only one in my house. Good for you. That's awesome. What if ISIS kicks in the window at 3 a.m.? I'm ready to shoot them. What if you're not there? Well, they get stolen, right? So we want to have that conversation. Again, it's up to the individual. I'm not here to browbeat anybody about how they should store or stage their firearms, but we at least need to be aware that they're preventing unauthorized access. Who else might be unauthorized? Besides strangers, burglars, and spouses with felony convictions.
Other family members?
Family members. Who else?
Friends.
Yeah, friends. They're not authorized. Unless I say so and I'm standing there. Now let's get really creative.
Aliens.
Could it be you? Not that creative.
Dogs.
How about you?
To another person's firearm.
Could you be the unauthorized person if you yourself slide into suicidal ideation? Should you be around your gun if you're suicidal, depressed, suffering a PTSD incident, Lyme disease? So part of what we talk about is preventing unauthorized access in the time of crisis. And it doesn't matter what that crisis is. If you shouldn't be around your firearms because you're a threat to self or others, I don't want to involve .gov. That's not necessary. If we as a gun community can hold each other responsible and accountable, we don't need to involve third parties. We don't need to involve the cops who are going to show up and be like, I don't really even know if I can take this. I know I have a judge's order, but where do I store it? Does it become mine? Is it the property of the department? How do you get it back? So we talk about that too. By the way, in a time of need, if you're in a state like mine or yours where you're not allowed to transfer your guns without a background check and going through all the hoops, what's an option?
Disassemble.
Thank you. What does that mean?
Let's take the part of the firing parts out of it, like the...
A non-serialized functional part that won't make you and me a felon. Especially if you can't like fit 27 guns in your car to go to your house where you don't have room for 27 guns. You can fit 27 firing pins though, in a little baggie. That's a baggie if you couldn't see. I'm just like holding my fist up.
I mean, and it could be a guide rod.
Totally.
As simple as that. I mean,
Yeah.
a firing pin could be more...
Yeah, something that's significant, a bolt carrier group, you know, but yeah, sure, I can go down to the gun store and buy another bolt carrier group if I'm really insistent on executing what I want to execute, right? But we're trying to create time and space. So check this out. This is a Venn diagram where we couldn't make the dot for mass shooting small enough. We couldn't find a pixel small enough that would still be representative of the whole, and you'd be able to see it. These are a little bit outdated. I haven't updated the slide. We have 2022 data, but it still maintains. So follow me down here. All firearm deaths. Here's all suicides, okay? Here's homicides, which is 37% of that number. Here's firearm suicides, which is 51% of that number. Depending on who you talk to, depending on the year, and depending on geography and state distribution, it's about 60% of all firearm deaths are suicides. Some people say 2/3, that's fine. In Wyoming, it's like 77%. It's really high. Rural areas much higher than urban areas. Then you see the rest of them. But here's the mass shooting thing. For the years 2018 to 2020, it was about 0.3% of all firearm deaths were mass shootings. 2022, 2023, that kicked up to about 1.4%. We're still like statistically negligible. But what does all the media cover? It's sensational, right? We don't cover the suicides. Check this figure out. So in Las Vegas, Nevada, my home state, not my hometown. I don't like Las Vegas, I like Reno. In an October shooting of 2017, we had 59 people die, 58 innocents in the shooter. I keep scratching out that number because in 2019, when we first put this presentation together, I was using 2016 data, and it was 58, so it was roughly equivalent. And then it went up, and went up, and it went up again. I just adjusted that to 74. Every day in America, we lose more people to firearm suicide than we lost in the biggest mass shooting in this country's history. Every single day. We have to be aware of this. Law enforcement, same thing. You're going to see some numbers. On the left is suicides, and on the right is line of duty deaths. Watch it flip. Yep. It flipped back in 2020, but that's because we were counting line of duty deaths to COVID. So if you subtract out the 119 from the 264, it's still more people in the law enforcement world take their own life than the duty itself does. Same thing in 2021, same thing with the COVID count. And these are self-reported. I got these data through bluehelp.org. Military suicide, a lot of veterans in our firearms community. It's about 1.5 times the rate of the normal suicide rate when we adjust for population differences in age and sex. There's your distribution between men and women. We hear 22 a day. That's a little conflated because there's some active duty stuff in there, but really it's, one is too many. It's closer to 18. Mike Sedini got to go back to Washington a few years ago, and he was part of the prevents team. Went to the White House, and he was the only guy from the gun community at the table. There are people from the VA, there's some politicians, there's some lawmakers, there's some NGO representation, but Mike was the only gun guy there. And at some point, they turned to him and said, what do we do to solve this with the veterans and the suicide and the firearms and all this? And he goes, you have to stop making the gun community the bad guy. Stop making the gun community the bad guy. That was in 2019. Turn the corner into 2020, January, we went to SHOT Show. We have a very, very good relationship with NSSF. February, there was the first ever conference on lethal means held between and among the VA, NSSF, and a couple other interested parties in San Francisco. Mike and I were there, and that was the first time that the Veterans Administration in this country ever used the word firearm when talking about suicide. Now, since then, they've been able to have a table at SHOT Show, which is awesome. The conversation continues to progress. We made that happen. It's pretty cool. We serve on a lot of boards and commissions and stuff. So I talked about getting upstream from stage 4. Stage 4 is a Mental Health America term, which is like that moment of crisis, right? Like you're right there. It's great to jump in at that crisis spot. That's what all the suicide prevention organizations will talk about. It's like, what do you do in a time of crisis with a person? Here, whip out your card and read off the talking points. I'd rather not have people descend into that level of despondency. So we offer free and anonymous mental health screenings. I'm wearing a wristband. It says WTTA.org/love. Now back, take a free and anonymous mental health screening today. We actually have 14 screenings now. You can see some of them there. A couple of them are in Spanish. These are powered by Mental Health America. Look at the distribution of youth. 11 to 17 years old, 18 to 24 years old. That's 2/3 of the people who take the screenings right there are under the age of 24. These things are like gold in schools. Kids love wristbands. And if you hand a mental health screening wristband to a kid at school, parents are like, that's cool. Go take the screening, son. 11 years old, checking in on themselves. Has nothing to do with firearms. This is what screenings do. It helps make you more aware, right? Become more insightful as to what's going on in your brain. You get to learn how you tick. You can communicate with your provider a little bit better. You can self-manage. Flyers. That's just a bunch of Mike's friends who are over at his house for like a UFC fight one night. They'll put on the wristbands and stuck their hands in the middle and took a picture. We're distributing these flyers into product packaging. So some of the manufacturers of not just firearms, but accessories and parts and anything ancillary. I mean, we're at a gun show downstairs, there's like knives and stuff. Like manufacturers are putting our literature in their boxes, take free and anonymous mental health screening. I'll talk about our partners in a minute. I hold in my hand a copy of this flyer. These are all available for download for free on our website too. So if you're in that community, if you're an FFL person and you want to have this at your shop or your range or your retail store, or you know somebody you regularly frequent as a customer, please, please, please invite them to take this in. And if you know somebody in the mental health community, what you can do is flip it over and on the back, have them stamp their logo right on it. There's mine. This sits on the counter at Reno Guns and Range in Reno, Nevada, passively right next to the cash register. So people are getting their background check. They're filling out their 4473, whatever. They're like, huh, mental health. Oh, local mental health provider. He's probably cool. Drop it into the bag, or they put it back, whatever. But it starts the conversation. It's very passive. It's very non-threatening. Cause of Pause is a program we have. I mentioned time of crisis, intervention in the time of crisis, right? We know that presence of firearms increases suicidality, suicidality by firearm. So anything that delays somebody in that crisis state from getting to their gun can protect against suicide. That doesn't mean that gun ownership has to be restricted. We just want it at the time of crisis. So we ask you to cause a pause. Let's hope that sound works on this thing, and if it doesn't, oh well. No sound. It's a beating heart. There's a heartbeat. Boom, 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 boom. Mike opens his safe. And then there's a pause. He sees the pictures of his daughters there. Makes him reconsider. He goes, maybe not today. A pause can be caused by something mechanical, like a locking device. It can be caused by something physical, like a safe or a barrier. It can be caused by something else physical, like separating the ammo from the gun, like everybody likes to talk about. We all know that's not practical for those of us who like to be prepared, but it's there. A pause can be caused by something psychological, like a trinket, something special that you remember. My safes are all decorated with, that's me as a cartoon and that's Mike as a cartoon. I never thought the day would come. I'm a cartoon. But this is our podcast. I have these stickers all over, and I think like I don't ever plan on descending into that level of despondency, but if I were to, I would see that and go, I don't really think I need to waste all the work that we've been doing. That might trigger me. I don't know.
How come he stopped for what?
He stopped because he saw the pictures of his girls there and he decided he wasn't going to take his life. It's a video we produced for this purpose. We also offer National Provider Healthcare Directory. So we're trying to recruit more therapists into this directory so that if you take one of those screenings, for example, and you're like, well, my anxiety is a little too high, go to the provider directory. You know you're going to find a person who's been trained, at least through us, probably our 2A savvy, if not an advocate. We'll offer mental health videos for instructors. California, along with like 16 other states or something like that, last year passed a requirement that if you're going to go through a concealed carry course, you must include at least 1 hour of mental health training. Well, if you're a firearms instructor and you're not me, who's a mental health person, how are you going to do this? Well, glad you asked. Walk the Talk America provides videos that you can just plug and play. An hour's worth, in fact. There's like 7 of them. I'm in one of them. That's the best one, I think. We offer slides, targets that you can download and print out. The inserts I talked about, flyers. We offer a mental health plan. What do you do if you get into a crisis? And there's a trauma mitigation video. Some of the people who work in this industry, you know, Betty back in accounting at Ruger doesn't ever plan on the day that Ruger gets sued because somebody did something unfortunate with one of their firearms, but she's rocked by that because she's affiliated with the company. She's like, I'm just an accountant. Why am I having these horrible thoughts of like this thing that this person did with our gun? We can get in front of that by teaching people how to basically entertain or consider the idea that that might happen, even if you're Betty in accounting. Apologies to Betty if she's here. I'm not picking on Betty. And finally, Kids to Kings. Kids to Kings is a program where we take firearms safety and firearms trainers, firearm safety people and firearms trainers, and put them into inner city youth schools to teach children how to act around guns. Largely, we're talking black kids in black neighborhoods in Atlanta, Georgia, but also Colorado. We've had some requests for various places around the country, but Devin Perkins heads that up. Kevin Dixie is a strong partner of ours, and Gorillas in the Mist, if you guys are familiar. They take these kids who are in really extreme circumstances in urban communities, take them out to the range, and teach them proper firearm techniques handling, because what they're seeing on hip-hop videos is not match reality, and we're trying to like de-glamorize violence around the firearm. It's really, really cool. This is our program, but Derek does his Kids Safe thing. It's not ours. We're separate organizations, but we partner very, very tightly. You'll see all our swag down at his booth, actually. And my kids probably shot some BB guns earlier, and they did very well. Scan that QR code if you'd like. You can watch me in videos talking about feelings, and everybody loves dudes talking about feelings, right? I'm going to set these outside. This QR code goes to the videos also. You have 10 core emotions. I'm going to set those there so I don't forget. 10 core emotions. It's really important to know neurologically what your brain is doing in response to environment so you get better control over your responses to the environment. We don't want to be acting reflexively in conversation, in Kohl's when there's a shoe sale, on the street when somebody poses or threatens us or postures. We're not gonna be like, ah, get away, man. He's like, I just tripped over the sidewalk. Now you just brandished. Like, if we know what our brains are doing and we can accurately name our emotions, we can get better charge of them so that we can have better intentionality. Yet again, something I do for free. I just try to push content out because I want to keep people well. It improves your marriages, your parenting. Scan it, bookmark it. Share it. I forgot I put that in there. This is, scan, bookmark, share that too. This is a 30-minute documentary we had done about Walk the Talk. So it's pretty short. The overview is a gal who's a local radio host in our community. She's been around for a million years. Really, really great lady named Connie. She had a daughter take her own life, former Marine, took her own life with a firearm. And Connie forever was like, I hate guns. Guns are stupid. Guns are bad. Guns are evil. Well, around about 2020, when the world went crazy and we shut everything down, one of the benefits was we all pivoted online, and Mike and I had the opportunity to appear on Crisis Support Services Nevada podcast hosted by Connie Ray. And Connie listened to Mike and I talking about this stuff, and she's like, I think I need to confront this irrational fear. So she hit me up, said, what do I do about this? We offered to take her out in the desert, going shooting, and she shot for the first time, and it's very, very powerful. So I invite you to watch that documentary. You can scan that too. Otherwise, you could just look up The Next Stage, Guns and Mental Health, and it'll pop right up on YouTube. There's our podcast. There's me as a cartoon character. Available anywhere podcasts are found. We interview people. Derek's been on it.
You said The Next Stage?
The Next Stage is, The Next Stage is the name of her documentary like series on YouTube. And then just type in Walk the Talk America or Guns and Mental Health. You can take a picture of that or scan it if you want. And that's where you can find us. In conclusion, I say this regularly as possible in as many forums as I can. I am trying to work myself out of a job. It's a little weird to have an entrepreneurial mental health person say that, because it's like, that's my business. But if mental illness ceased to exist in Northern Nevada or globally or whatever, and I didn't have to do therapy for a living, and I still had like 8 years left on my lease, which I do, I think it's like 10, I would rapidly turn the whole place into a coffee shop and brew pub to pay the bills, because everybody would be happy and healthy. Kids wouldn't get bullied on the playground. I wouldn't have to deal with suicidal individuals. Divorces wouldn't be happening. People would all be in church. You know, like, that sounds like bliss to me. So I'm trying to work myself out of a job. Please take our content and share it around so that y'all can stay happy, healthy, and sane in your own kitchens and living rooms and workspaces, and it's not locked up in my head behind some curtain where I'm like pulling levers. That's not how mental health works. Whatever I know, you should also know. It's that easy. So with that, I'll take questions, concerns, quips, quandaries, queries, cheap shots, bad jokes.
Hi, thank you so much. On the last presentation, Gary, was talking about what happens after you shoot someone.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I know that it would be different for each individual person, but are any of these videos, do they address what you could possibly prepare for, some scenarios, things like that?
So my bias is that I go back to emotional functioning. If I know what the emotions are rolling around in my head, I can make better sense of them and then act out of logic instead of limbic. So I'm pointing here and here because like frontal lobe is where your executive functioning is and your logic, analysis, reason. Middle and rear part of the brain is emotion. It's called your limbic system. We don't want to be acting out of limbic because that's when we're reflexive and we do things we regret. If we act out of logic, we're in a much better spot. Slide. Bunt. Sorry, look like third base coach. The idea is that we want to know what we're feeling and then use it responsibly to make the next decision, not just freak out and panic. In an incident like that, where life is on the line, potentially, you will get what's amounted to a trauma response. The brain will get flooded. Sometimes it's hard to come back from that if we haven't had proper training. I do explain all this in the series on emotional functioning. That's why I push that super hard, because if you know well what your brain is doing, you can know well how to navigate through it and not just get stuck in post-traumatic stress, for example, or anxiety or whatever it is. So I explain all that. That's how I go about that. But shorter answer is the trauma mitigation video that Rob and Mike and I did talks directly to that, because you're essentially anticipating the thing that you think may never come. So you're already training your brain to think about it. So when we prepare doing our scenarios, and then we get evaluated after the scenarios, that's essentially what we're doing. And a little sneak preview, I teach emotion like a wave. The thing is, as life goes on, the waves get bigger. So we'll train up to a certain level just through normal life. And then if we're in like a first responder job or an emergency medicine job or something like that will train a little higher beyond the average person. That acts as a buffer against incidents like that. So the more you train, the better off you'll be. And on the training end of things, some people say, I can't afford to have my gun, in a safe or whatever in case ISIS kicks in the window at 3 a.m. We say train as hard retrieving your weapon as you do training with your weapon. So there is no excuse. When Michael say, like in a podcast, his fingers are just tapping across the quick access safe. Train, set your alarm at 3 a.m. So when it goes off, you roll out of bed, hit your thumbprint sensor, pull out, and practice. Like, where's the flashlight? We should not have an excuse, especially with children in the home or children who have friends that come over and start opening drawers. Yeah, stuff like that. The more we train, the more we'll prepare our brains for that incident if and when it does occur. Long answer to a short question, sorry.
Thank you.
Okay.
So great presentation. I just want a few thoughts. So I'm Derek, president of the Kids Safe Foundation. Part of what I do as kind of a thought leader in this realm is I'm aware of my own mental health, and I practice what I preach. And so I do one of their free and anonymous health screenings every quarter. And it's a way for me to make sure that I'm doing good so I can be good for others. And everybody in this room that now knows about Walk the Talk America, you guys can be that same thought leader. And now you can present, especially here in California, you guys can present, viable solutions to help preserve your civil liberties. And so, and another thing, talking about the secure gun storage is, I hear it quite often is I have to be able to get to that gun. I have to be able to get to that gun. And we talk from a defensive standpoint. Do you really need to get to the gun so fast that your kid could be hurt with it? And that's one of our missions is to prevent these tragedies. And, what we just saw in Georgia as a prime example is there was somebody that had mental health issues that should not had, free reign of a firearm. And so that's kind of where all of us here in this room collectively is we're trying to change the thought process and showcase responsible gun ownership because we're all responsible. That's why we're here. And so I think that's so well done. I'm glad
Well
to
stated.
be connected with you guys and support you guys. And I appreciate all of your support.
You too, buddy.
Thank you.
Another one.
Oh, yeah.
Do you provide, is this on? Do you provide any trainings to law enforcement or military law enforcement or military medical?
Personally, for about 4 years, I trained my own community at the Nevada Post Academy in Northern Nevada. But as an organization, we have not involved ourselves too much in that because they tend to keep it in-house at their own academies, and it's hard to outsource that kind of stuff. And if we were asked, we would probably consider sending one of the clinicians to go. And when I was doing this for the Northern Nevada Law Enforcement Academy, I always dropped in a commercial for WTTA. And I'd hand out stickers and wristbands. And the cops were always like, cool, every single time. It was great. Like, it really helped move the conversation forward and normalize it. Another bias I have is that I've seen the pendulum swing from nobody talks about mental illness to everybody needs a therapist. Both of those are incorrect. Somewhere in the middle where it's like, hey, you good, bro? Haven't heard from you in a few days. All right, I don't need to send Derek to professional counseling if he goes, I'm super stressed out. I go, let's go have a beer. Derek doesn't drink, but like, I will. He can have a Diet Coke.
So buddy checks. Like that's what I put in my own.
Buddy check.
My own social media is a buddy check. I'll throw it out there. And that's a way for me to kind of like his cause for the pause is that's my mental reminder that, hey, how am I doing? And then it also invokes that emotional response from my crowd and my followers because then they can like, hey, I'm doing okay.
Yeah.
And one thing I want to stress, it's okay to not be okay. And it's how we deal with that in that situation. And that's why that cause for the pause is really, really important.
Yeah, for law enforcement, firefighters, plumbers and pipe fitters, any tough guy job really, whether or not there's guns involved, there's a stigma within that culture not to do the buddy check even, except over a beer. And usually it's like 6 beers, not one. So me simply saying that helps a great deal. So if you're connected with the law enforcement community, please get them our literature so we can have that conversation about like, it's cool, man. Like Jake is built like a linebacker and often wears a beard. He's a dude who talks about feelings. You can talk about feelings too, right? Like that tends to break the ice a little bit. And it fosters a more reasonable conversation. I am proud to say that among the law enforcement agencies in Northern Nevada, every one of them now either has employed in its own on its own payroll or has on contract a mental health professional. So that's starting to that tide's starting to turn. It's no more the white knuckling it through, drinking yourself into oblivion, screaming at your wife, getting divorced. Like healing is happening among the tough professions. It's pretty cool. That answer your question?
Still lacking a little bit in the military, but that's
Very much so, and DoD is efforting, but that's like turning an aircraft carrier and not a speedboat. So it's getting there. We're well networked with that crowd too, and trying to make some inroads on how they can change their language and the way they screen people. And nobody wants to go seek help when they think they're not going to be deployable or their career ladder is going to be cut short. And we're very aware of that.